All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get straight into the shooting correction chart. The shooting correction chart is the most accurate tool that we can use when learning how to shoot or to correct errors. Don't second guess the correction shooting chart. The only errors that it will not correct for is cross-eye dominance. So if I'm right-handed, left eye dominant, my round should go to the 9 o'clock position. Left-handed, right eye dominant, they should impact to the 3 o'clock position. We've had shooters that were able to correct this and impact a dead center, but 95% of the shooters, that was the only errors that we saw, or the difference as far as accuracy on the chart. So we're going to go ahead and start at the 12 o'clock position, breaking your wrist up. All right, I'm going to demonstrate everything right-handed. Got a clear and safe firearm. Breaking the wrist up is literally breaking the wrist in the upward position. It's related to shot anticipation, okay? Or anticipating the recoil. What you'll notice is probably 95% or 90% of the errors are related to shot anticipation or anticipating the recoil. And how we get rid of these issues are to say squeeze, squeeze, squeeze as we're pulling the trigger. So again, breaking the wrist up is literally breaking your wrist up before we shoot. We're trying to force the round out, okay? That's all that is, 12 o'clock position. At the 1 o'clock position, we have healing. All right, this is related to anticipation of the recoil. Healing is we're squeezing the bottom part of our palm, okay? And what this is going to do is it's going to force our barrel up and to the right at the 1 o'clock position. So as I'm squeezing, it pushes on the backside lower part of my grip, which is going to force my barrel up into the 1 o'clock position. All right. Again, this is related to shot anticipation or anticipation of the recoil. How we break this, we say it out loud as we're pulling the trigger. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. That's the only way you guys are going to break this as new shooters. All right. All right. At the 3 o'clock position, we have thumbing, squeezing your thumb, or too much trigger finger. Okay. Remember back when we were discussing your trigger finger? That's exactly what it is. Too much trigger finger, or we're pushing with our thumbs. Again, this is related to shot anticipation or anticipation of the recoil. So when we think the round's going to go off, what we'll do is we'll tighten our thumbs or our hands to get ready for the round to come out, okay? So either too much trigger finger or I'm pushing with my thumbs. As you can see the barrel, all I'm doing is applying more pressure with my thumbs, okay? Thumbing, squeezing thumb, or too much trigger finger. Again, how we correct this is try not to focus on squeezing the gun too tight and say squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. You're going to notice that's a pretty repetitive phrase that we use during all of our training. Even as advanced shooters, the more advanced we get, I can still say squeeze, 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 but I'm saying it to myself real lightly, okay? All right, so let's move on to the 4 o'clock position. Tightening your grip while pulling the trigger. Again, this is related to shot anticipation, all right? We're scared in a way that we're not going to be able to control the gun once the round goes off, okay? What that means is I'm tightening these 3 fingers at the exact same time I'm pulling the trigger, okay? You'll notice that it should come down to roughly the 4 o'clock position. All right. Again, how do we alleviate this? By saying, try not to squeeze the grip too tight and saying squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. All right. Let's move on to the 5 o'clock position, or 6 o'clock, excuse me. Breaking wrist down, pushing forward, or dropping your head, or drooping your head. All right, breaking the wrist down is exactly opposite, is breaking your wrist up. Instead of breaking it up, we're breaking it down. This is related to shot anticipation as well. We're kind of forcing the round out. All right, so breaking the wrist down forces it down into the 6 o'clock position. Pushing forward, okay? Pushing forward just means I'm pushing with my arms. As you can see, my barrel drops, okay? So it's going to go in the 6 o'clock position as well. Drooping our heads. If you've ever watched any advanced training, this is what they'll tell you: to bring the gun to your eyes, not your eyes, to your sights, okay? So what happens is, if I bring my head down to my sights, my target appears to be lower than my barrel, okay, or my sights. So what'll happen is, if I raise my head up here, I'm dead square centered of the camera lens, okay? If I drop my head, it places my sights at this distance 1 to 2 inches above the camera lens. So what I do then is I bring my barrel down to realign with my camera. But if I come up, now I'm 1 inch to 2 inches lower than my point of aim, point of impact, okay? Breaking your wrist down, related to shot anticipation, all right? Pushing forward is related to shot anticipation, all right? How do we alleviate these? By not being scared of the round. It comes with time, and also saying squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Drooping the head, dropping the head. Most of the time this comes with wanting to go faster than we feel we should, okay? I do it, but I've learned to correct myself as far as accuracy. Speed shooters, you'll see a lot of speed shooters do it, because the faster I can get my gun up, drop my head and meet, I cut a little bit of time out. So we come up, we drop our head. Instead of keeping our head straight up, all right, it cuts just a little bit of time out. Now there's a happy medium to where you can drop your head and still be accurate. But if I drop my head like a turtle and then bring my gun up, I'm going to be off, okay? Work on that. So now let's go into the 7 o'clock position, jerking or slapping the trigger. If you remember when we were talking about resetting your trigger, we don't need to come all the way off of the trigger, okay? This would be slapping. We're coming off of the trigger, and when we come off of the trigger, our mind tells us we got to shoot faster, and the only way we can shoot faster is slam our finger back down on the trigger, which is going to cause it to go at the 7 o'clock position. All right, so let's go over slapping the trigger. I'm going to slap the trigger, and it should bring it down 7 o'clock position. All right, I'm working this in a double action, so you're going to be able to see the air a little more. Striker fires, you won't be able to see as much because the trigger is a lot easier. Single action, the trigger is a lot easier to pull. Jerking the trigger, we've already discussed jerking the trigger. When we pull the trigger, it's smooth. This is why we say squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. If you watch the hammer, jerking the trigger would be at any point, even at the last millimeter, we can still jerk that trigger, okay? It needs to come back in one fluid motion. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until the round goes off, okay? One of the ways that, really the only way we can prevent this is, again, not knowing when the round comes out. The reason why we worry about shot anticipation, the reason why we jerk the trigger is because our mind tells us, I want to know when the round goes off. So as I start pulling my trigger, slowly, I really don't know when the round's going off. The only way I can control when that round goes off is to what? Jerk the trigger. So I don't know when the round's going off. I'm squeezing. I want it to go off. I jerk the trigger. Okay. Shot anticipation for the most part. And we want to know when the round goes off. Okay. The only way we can really break that is to say squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Whenever the round breaks over, it breaks over, and that's what you want. I don't need to know when the round goes off, okay? The reason being, I've already got my sights up on target. I've already made the decision to go ahead and begin pulling the trigger and shoot the target, all right? That's all I need to know. I'm on target. I'm choosing to shoot it. I don't have to force the round out, okay? Slow down, work on your trigger squeeze, and this will fall into place. All right, tightening the fingers, okay? Tightening the fingers is also related to, we're kind of scared of the gun, all right? What happens is, before I pull the trigger, I tighten all of my fingers, which forces the barrel, all right, down and to the left, all right? See how it's going down and to the left? Now, as I tighten my fingers, it locks the gun in place. So even though when I pull the trigger, it's still forced down into the 7/730 position, all right? If you're constantly finding yourself, having to find yourself squeeze a gun so tight, then you probably either need a little more time, or the gun that you're shooting, the caliber is too much for you, okay? Happen in compact guns. Some compact guns will, if you don't have a lot of strength, they'll actually fly out of your hands, okay? So at some point, if you can't break these habits of squeezing the gun too tight, then you might need to step down or get one of the little finger strengtheners from Academy, sports stores, places like that, and work on building some strength in your hands, okay? 9 o'clock position, too little trigger finger. Again, I showed you earlier, too little trigger finger is going to force my barrel to the 9 o'clock position. Even though I'm pulling my trigger straight back, it's forcing my barrel to the 9 o'clock position. If you see this, work on putting your finger in a little bit more on your trigger, and that's the only way to correct this issue, okay? Pushing, anticipating the recoil, and wanting the round to come out, all right? So pushing while we're pulling the trigger is basically going to cause it to go up into the 10-10-30 position. So I'm pushing. How we break this? Again, squeeze, 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 all right? Like I said a few minutes ago, as you notice, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze alleviates 90 to 90% of these issues. What'll happen when we're training is we'll make our students say it out loud on the firing line, squeeze, 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 and they'll start getting more accurate. But when they start getting more accurate, their muscle memory goes back to being silent. And then their rounds, they'll start jerking the trigger. For the most part, usually new shooters, left side, all right, 180 degrees left side, that's where most of the rounds go. It's all related to trying to shoot faster than you need to, or shot anticipation, okay? All right, so that is a good detailed description of the shooting chart. It is not any more complicated than what I just showed you. Trust the shooting chart. Take your time while you're shooting. Follow the tips you're about ready to see, and you know, within a couple weeks you should be able to see a significant decrease in your shot placement. All right, have a good day and God bless.